And we've got one more gift to give you here at Morning Offering in celebration of St. Patrick's Day. It's time for a chat with Pat.
Yes, and today our guest is Daniel Gallagher. He lectures in philosophy and literature at Ralston College, and he previously served as a Latin secretary to Popes Benedict XVI and Francis. And we're talking to him today about an article that appeared in The Catholic Thing, The Truth About Truth and the Truth About Freedom. Welcome, Daniel, and happy St. Patty's Day.
Pat, happy St. Patrick's Day to you, and especially to you. I prayed for you this morning. It's easy to remember to pray for you because my mother's name is also Patricia.
Oh,
so
how nice.
Yeah.
Well, I can use all the prayers I can get. So thank you very much, Daniel. And I do want to publicly thank you for switching days since my schedule got all messed up last week. So I really.
Oh, my pleasure.
But I want to jump into this because we only have a few minutes. So this is a great article. But can you explain to our audience about what liberalism, because we get that term all turned around, what liberalism is as you use it in this article and its connection to freedom?
Sure. So people often hear liberalism today as referring to some kind of a political ideology.
Right.
People who lean towards the left and they oppose it to conservative values, and in a Partesian way, it would be the difference that people associate with liberalism with the Democrats and conservative Republicans.
Right.
But liberalism has a wider notion and a wider meaning than that. It's still debated, but the general idea is that the people are free to determine, in fact, how they will be ruled, and the sovereignty, in other words, the authority to establish how a nation or a people governs itself, resides with the people, and that people should be free to make that determination. And that's kind of what's called the classical ideal of liberalism, which is passed on to us through the ancients, and Cicero being a key figure, John Locke in modern period. And that's sort of that's the meaning that I have in mind when I'm discussing these issues about freedom. Yeah.
So one of the things, obviously, that's very connected here is you say that, there is a relationship between freedom and truth. Can you explain that relationship to our audience?
Yes. So as Catholics, we should be quite proud that although this seems a new idea to many people, that in fact, freedom is not just hanging out there in an abstract way, undetermined, but the Judeo-Catholic tradition holds that, in fact, the reason we are free, the very reason we are free, is that we can seek the truth. Our freedom is ordered towards something. And in fact, it's sort of an intricate, sophisticated philosophical argument that I won't go into, but I'm convinced that freedom does not make sense unless there is truth. Right. In other words, that if we say freedom, it's freedom for what or to what? Mm-hmm. And freedom only makes sense to me if it is ordered to something. So you're either free to follow what it is that you perceive to be good and true, or you're not free. And so truth is, so to speak, kind of precedes the very idea of freedom. That's very contrary to modern notions of freedom, which basically see it as undetermined, and that anything that imposed from the outside or inside is contrary to freedom, whereas I actually think it's really the opposite. But the idea is that even in the American founding, what I'm arguing, in fact, in this 250th year of our anniversary as a nation, is that our founders had a very clear idea that freedom was not unconnected from truth. And we fear today, when we think about freedom, that we are embracing a notion that denies truth. Whereas, quite honestly, those who are responsible for framing the kind of republic that we live in, I think that it was as clear as day to them that freedom is ordered to truth, that it's not simply unanchored.
And I think you bring that up when you talk about we have this concept that truth would limit freedom, but it really broadens freedom, correct?
That's correct. And this one of the best articulators of this idea was St. John Paul II, Pope St. John Paul II. And it's really important that we don't forget the ways in which he articulated this. Now, Benedict and Francis, all the popes since John Paul, including Leo, have in one way or another articulated this. But I think that John Paul II had the most elaborate articulation of this. And the basic idea is this, which actually emerges Redemptor Hominis, that when it comes to God's revelation, and the salvation offered us in Jesus Christ. That God, in His infinite wisdom, wants us to be free to accept that. The beauty of our faith is the freedom that we have to accept what God reveals to us. And so, again, what I think is fascinating is we think that this is an idea, this idea of freedom is something invented in the Enlightenment,
Right.
or sometime in more recent times, whereas John Paul was reminding us, no, actually, in the earliest days of Christianity, one of the things that made Christianity so distinct was equality, the idea of equality and freedom under God, which was not a given under Greece or Rome, ancient Rome, or other ancient cultures. It was something radically new that Christianity introduced.
Mm-hmm.
And we basically fulfill our vocation by freely choosing the truth and giving thanks to God that, in fact, He has made us in His image and likeness, and part of the image and likeness is, in fact, to be free. Is a great gift from God.
So, Daniel, do you think part of our issue today with freedom is that we cannot agree that there is an objective truth? We think everybody gets to make up their own truth, so therefore freedom would mean that I can do whatever I want.
Yes, Pat, that hits the nail on the head. That from the beginning, going back to the founding of our nation, the founders and the framers, they were very aware of this risk, that in fact there was plurality. And in fact, our very nation, what made it so distinctive was that people were seeking refuge from either religious persecution or in sometimes even ethnic persecution, and is creating this great kind of mixing pot of diversity. And so in that, within that, how are we going to find an agreed upon truth that we can all agree that we are directed towards? And this is what makes it difficult for at least Catholics to believe that freedom is a good thing, because freedom simply seems to divide us since we can't agree on this one truth. Well, my response to that is that if we are to make any headway here as citizens of this republic, that we have to remind ourselves that there were a set of truths that were generally agreed upon. And they include, in fact, that man is free, that the sovereignty resides with the people, and the ever-elusive pursuit of happiness. But that equality under the law is something that was considered to be self-evident and that was accessible to all peoples. And what should encourage us is that some of these truths, which are so foundational to our founding as a republic, we can debate them in an open arena on the basis of reason. That we, as Catholics, probably no one basically surpasses us in our confidence in reason to argue these ideas. Now, our conviction about freedom and truth and the connection between the two is grounded in our faith, and we should be grateful for that. But that does not mean that we have to present the arguments for that grounding, that connection between freedom and truth, on our faith in order to persuade others, because we do believe, and this is where Benedict XVI was so key, that these are not only accessible to reason, but people don't realize they come out of this Judeo-Christian tradition, even which they're denying. And if they have any claims to there being human rights, well, they might not acknowledge a kind of a gratitude to Catholicism and Christianity, but that's where they got the idea in the first place of human rights. So that's my message.
Oh, Daniel, this is a great article, and I would certainly encourage people to go to the Catholic Thing online and read this article, The Truth About Truth and the Truth About Freedom. Thanks again, Daniel, so much for being with us today, and you have a happy St. Paddy's Day.
Thank you, Pat, and happy St. Paddy's Day to you and your listeners.